10 minutes before the wedding march, my maid of honor sent me a text, "Guess who he'll choose? You or me?" She had no idea what I'd already uncovered. Every flirty message. Every whispered scheme. A DNA test proving the baby in her belly wasn't his. And an invitation I'd personally mailed to the man who actually got her pregnant. 300 guests. A groom who thought I was too soft to fight back. A best friend who'd spent 3 years sharpening the knife behind my back. They expected tears. They expected me to crumble. Instead, I gave them a stage, and then I burned it down with every last one of them on it. This is the story of a wedding that became a reckoning. 10 minutes before the wedding, my best friend sent me a text. Asterisk, guess what, Nora? Do you think he'll choose you, or me? Asterisk. I stared at the screen and smiled. She didn't know that I had screenshots of every single flirty message she'd ever sent him. She didn't know that I had recordings of the phone calls where the two of them plotted how to bleed my family's money dry. She didn't know that I already had a DNA report naming the real father of the baby growing inside her. And she definitely didn't know that the invitation to this wedding, the one sitting on her so-called secret lover's kitchen counter, had been mailed by me. 300 guests. A ballroom dripping in crystal and roses. The maid of honor, ready to waddle up the aisle with a pregnant belly and a dagger hidden behind her smile. The groom, ready to kneel and weep and beg for forgiveness while his mother clutched my wrist and whispered that a woman's reputation, once shattered, can never be mended. I laughed. You want to put on a show? Fine. Let me build you a stage, and then I'll burn it down with every last one of you on it. From the secret recordings to the paternity test, from the testimony of 5 broken victims to the moment the police snapped handcuffs around her wrists, this wedding belonged to me. I stood alone in the bridal suite, 10 minutes before the music was due to start. The dress was custom-made, the train pooling behind me like melted ivory. My veil had been hand-stitched by my mother over 3 sleepless nights, the lace edges worked with antique patterns she'd saved in a cedar chest for 30 years. My bouquet was white roses and baby's breath, chosen at the flower market at 5 in the morning, simple and clean, just like the love I once believed in. The woman in the mirror looked serene. Her makeup was flawless, her hair swept up with pearl pins. Any stranger would see a bride blissfully unaware of the firestorm about to ignite. My phone glowed. Vivian's message hung on the screen, followed by a smiley face emoji, that yellow, squinting, corner-mouthed grin she'd sent me 1,000 times before. Every girl's night, every inside joke, every whispered secret, it was always there. For 3 years, that emoji had meant we're in this together. I knew now what it really meant. You're the mark, and I'm counting down the minutes. 3 years ago, Vivian had arrived at the office looking like a frightened deer. She spilled her coffee during the interview, and I handed her a napkin and put in a good word with HR. She was assigned to my team, her desk right beside mine. I taught her the ropes, fixed her proposals, and invited her to lunch every day. She said she was all alone in the city, no friends, no family, a rented room with a broken water heater. I let her stay in my guest room for a month until she found a new place. A year ago, when my heart was shattered by a different man, she drank an entire bottle of bourbon with me. I threw up until dawn, and she held my hair back and cursed his name. I sobbed into her shoulder and said, "Thank God I have you." 6 months ago, when Ethan proposed, she was happier than I was. She scouted venues, sampled menus, hand-picked sugared almonds for the favors. At my final dress fitting, she stood behind me and looked at our reflection with tears in her eyes and said, "Nora, you're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen." 1 month ago, she stroked my veil with an almost painful longing. "Do you think I'll ever get to wear a dress like this?" she whispered. I told her of course she would, and when she did, I'd be her maid of honor. She smiled like a flower blooming. I know now that underneath that flower was a serpent's tongue, flickering, tasting the air for weakness. I set down my phone without replying. Inside my photo album was an encrypted folder. The password was my birthday. Vivian had set it up for me, her eyes wide with sisterly concern. You have to protect your privacy, Nora. Inside that folder were 47 screenshots. Her messages to Ethan. **, is Nora home? I miss you, **, she's at her parents'. Come over, **, give me 30 minutes. Delete the chat, **, don't worry, she never checks my phone. She's too stupid to notice anything, **. There were worse ones. More intimate. More cruel. I had captured every single one, each carefully dated. The earliest was from a week before Ethan and I got engaged. She had sent him a selfie, lounging on my couch, wearing my pajamas, the ones with the little bears, a birthday gift from my mother who said, even after you're married, you should stay a little bit cute. I looked at that selfie for a long, long time. Then I walked to the bathroom and threw up. The next day, I bought a recording device. Later, when Vivian accidentally left her tablet at my apartment, I installed a cloud sync app. Every message, every photo, every hidden, filthy secret dripped into my hands. I heard her on the phone with Ethan, scheming about how to handle my old man, how to get Nora to sign over her shares, how to turn premarital assets into joint property after the wedding. Word for word, laugh for laugh. Their greed wasn't abstract, it was clinical. They discussed my father's client list as if it were already theirs, talked about post-wedding asset transfers with the casual precision of two accountants splitting a bonus. She was also on the phone with someone else. His name was Harry Shaw, Ethan's cousin, a useless drone with a sinecure at the family company. Vivian had slept with him several times, always during Ethan's business trips. When she got pregnant, she couldn't even be sure which man's child it was. So she gambled. She bet on Ethan. *, we'll just pin it on him for now. If it turns out not to be his, I'll figure something out, *, her exact words to Harry, captured crystal clear. Harry had laughed nervously and said something about how Ethan would kill him if he ever found out. Vivian's reply was ice cold, *, he won't find out. And if he does, he's already in too deep to do anything about it, *. And there was the DNA report. At 16 weeks pregnant, Vivian asked me to come with her to a prenatal checkup. She said she felt a little anemic and asked me to pick up her iron supplements at the pharmacy. During those few minutes, her medical file lay open on the doctor's desk. I swabbed her water bottle for saliva, and earlier, from Ethan's razor, I had already collected skin cells. The process was simple enough, I'd researched it online. A top-tier lab, expedited results, 3 days. I picked up the report on a Wednesday. The sun was warm, the sky a perfect, cloudless blue. I sat on a bench outside the lab and read the conclusion over and over until the letters blurred. Ethan Shaw is excluded as the biological father of the fetus. I didn't cry. I just felt cold. A deep, marrow-freezing cold, as if someone were pouring ice water slowly through my ribs. 3 years of friendship. 3 years of love. All counterfeit. In their eyes, I had never been anything but a sheep with a full fleece, waiting for the shears. My phone lit up again. Vivian, * Nora. Why aren't you answering? Are you mad at me? It was just a joke, *. Another smiley face. I typed back, one careful letter at a time, *, not mad. The wedding's about to start. Are you ready? Asterisk. Her reply came instantly. Asterisk, so ready. My maid of honor dress is going to blow you away, I promise. Asterisk. I can't wait. I locked the phone and took one last look in the mirror. The same serene bride stared back, but her eyes were no longer soft. They were cold, cold as a honed blade pressed against silk. I stood, breathed in deeply, and pushed open the door. The wedding march was already swelling beyond the hallway. 300 voices murmured behind the gilded double doors. My father took my arm, and I felt the slight tremor in his hand. No matter what happens, Dad, I whispered, just sit and watch. He didn't understand. But he nodded. My heels clicked on the marble floor. The show was about to begin. The aisle stretched ahead, 80 steps from the entrance to the altar. I had counted. The chandeliers turned the ballroom into a sea of gold, and the massive screen on stage cycled through our engagement photos, me laughing in fields of lavender, Ethan spinning me in the surf, our faces bright with what everyone believed was perfect happiness. Hundreds of eyes fastened onto me. A string quartet played something soft and soaring. The scent of roses and expensive perfume hung in the air. I could feel the weight of every gaze, the collective expectation of 300 people who had dressed up, traveled here, and were ready to celebrate what they thought was a love story. Ethan waited at the end of the carpet, dressed in a Tom Ford tuxedo I had flown to Hong Kong to pick out for him, $18,000 of hand-stitched wool and silk that I had paid for. His hair was slicked back, his smile a portrait of tender devotion. If I hadn't known better, I would have wept at the beauty of it all. Beside him stood Vivian, my maid of honor. Her champagne gown draped elegantly over the gentle swell of her belly, the folds artfully hiding what she thought was her secret weapon. Her hair was twisted into a French knot, and her earlobes sparkled with the pearl earrings I'd given her for her last birthday. Her makeup was immaculate, her smile soft and beatific. A Madonna in chiffon. When her eyes met mine, something flickered in them. A brief, gloating gleam. She was savoring this moment, the calm before she detonated my life. I smiled back. And I saw her blink, just once, off rhythm. My father delivered me to Ethan's hands. Ethan's grip was warm and dry, his thumb stroking the back of my hand in a gesture that used to make my heart flutter. Now, my skin crawled. I forced myself not to pull away. I could smell his cologne, the one I had bought him for our anniversary, and it turned my stomach. The officiant launched into his polished script. Blessings, readings, the poetry of eternal love. I heard none of it. My focus was a single, tight coil of silence, waiting. Then came the moment the program labeled words from the maid of honor. Vivian stepped forward, cradling a microphone. The spotlight pooled around her, setting her champagne gown aglow. She looked like a painting, all soft focus and trembling vulnerability. Nora is the best person I've ever known, she began, her voice shimmering with rehearsed emotion. We've worked together for 3 years, and she taught me so much. Her eyes welled up. Real tears, I suspected, not because she felt guilt, but because she was high on the impending chaos. She had waited for this moment like a child counting down to Christmas. So I want nothing more than for Nora to be happy, she said, and her voice broke exquisitely. But there's something she deserves to know. The air in the ballroom thickened. Forks paused mid-air. My mother, seated at the front table in her burgundy silk dress, set her champagne flute down with a clink. My father's jaw tightened. Vivian turned to face me. The tears streamed freely now. Nora, I'm so sorry. I'm pregnant. And the baby, it's Ethan's. She let the words hang there, quivering. I love him, and he loves me. This wedding shouldn't go on. Silence crashed down like a wave. 5 seconds of absolute, breathless stillness. Then the ballroom erupted. My mother's chair toppled backward as she shot to her feet, her face white with shock. "You," she stammered, but no other words came. My father was already standing, his face dark as storm clouds, his fists clenched. He didn't look at Vivian. He looked straight at Ethan. The look on his face was one I had only seen once before, when a business partner had tried to cheat him and ended up in court. Ethan's mother dropped her teacup. It shattered against the tablecloth, dark liquid blooming across white silk. "Son," she rasped, "is this true?" Ethan's face had gone the color of bone. He stared at Vivian, then at me, then at the gawking crowd. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked like a man who had planned a careful robbery only to watch his accomplice set off the alarm too early. Vivian was supposed to wait, to corner me privately, later, after the honeymoon, after the ink was dry on the financial transfers. But she had grown impatient. She wanted her victory lap now, in front of everyone. She had spent 3 years playing the role of the sweet best friend, and she was tired of the costume. "Nora, don't listen to her." Ethan's voice finally erupted, too loud, cracking at the edges. He lunged toward me, hands out. "She's insane. There's nothing between us." I didn't move. I watched him perform, this man who had been the center of my universe, and I felt nothing but a cold, detached curiosity. How had I never noticed the falseness in his eyes? The way his tenderness was always timed, always transactional, always followed by a request, a loan, a favor, an introduction to one of my father's colleagues. Vivian didn't retreat. She placed a protective hand on her belly and lifted her chin, her voice clear and steady as a bell. "I'm not insane. I'm 4 months pregnant, Ethan. Can you stand here and swear it's not yours?" Ethan wheeled on her. In that split second, his mask slipped completely, and what lay beneath was ugly, venomous, panicked, cornered. He looked at her not with love but with pure, distilled hatred. He had never loved her. He had never loved me. The only thing Ethan Shaw loved was the reflection of himself in a gilded mirror. His mother rushed forward, seizing Vivian's arm. "You're lying. My son would never do such a thing. What proof do you have?" It was fascinating, in a clinical way, to watch the machinery of denial crank into motion. Margaret Shaw wasn't asking to learn the truth, she was building a wall, brick by brick, to protect the illusion of her perfect son. My own mother stood frozen, tears brimming but not falling, her fingers digging into my father's sleeve so hard the fabric bunched. The room churned with whispers and raised phones. I could almost hear the social media posts being drafted in real time. Asterisk, can you believe it? At the Sinclair wedding, the maid of honor is pregnant by the groom. Asterisk. They were all waiting. Waiting for the explosion. Waiting for me to shatter, to scream, to claw at Vivian's face like a scorned woman in a soap opera. Vivian was waiting for it too. I could see it in the way she balanced her weight, ready to fall dramatically the moment I touched her, ready to clutch her belly and wail. I looked down at my bouquet. The white roses were still perfectly fresh, tiny droplets of water glistening on the petals. I raised my head and smiled. "The baby," I said, my voice light and conversational. "Is it really his?" Vivian's bravado hitched. Her eyes flickered, a micro-flinch, invisible to the crowd but as loud as a scream to me. She recovered quickly. "Of course it's his. How can you even ask that?" Her voice climbed into righteous indignation, and she reached for my hand. I took a step back. Her fingers closed on empty air. Ethan stepped in, donning his mask of sorrowful duty. Nora, please, you have to understand. This is a terrible mess, but I have to take responsibility. Vivian is carrying my child. Be reasonable. You're a good woman, you'll find someone better. Reasonable, I repeated, tasting the word. Be reasonable. In my mind, I replayed the recording I had listened to 100 times. Ethan's voice, lazy and contemptuous, filtering through the speakers in my car. Nora. She's just so naive, so easy to handle. A few sweet words and she's completely devoted. Honestly, it's boring. If it weren't for her father's company and his contacts, I'd have ended it ages ago. But the Sinclair network is worth tolerating a little boredom. I had sat in the driver's seat, in the dark of my own garage, and listened to it on a loop until the tears stopped and a cold, crystalline resolve took their place. That was the night I stopped mourning my relationship and started planning my exit. Now I looked Ethan full in the face. You want me to be reasonable? Were you being reasonable when you slept with my best friend? Were you being reasonable when you two plotted how to steal my family's money? Were you being reasonable when you told her I was just a boring rich girl and not worth the effort? The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. His hand, still reaching toward me, fell to his side. He shot a wild, questioning look at Vivian. You said she didn't know anything. Vivian's expression had gone rigid. The tears were still there, but the emotion behind them had flipped, from feigned sorrow to genuine, creeping dread. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. For the first time in 3 years, she had nothing to say. Did you really think, I said, raising my voice so it carried to the farthest corners of the ballroom, that I didn't know? I lifted my hand. From the wings, Mina Cole strode forward. She was in her early 30s, sharp-suited, her face an unreadable mask of professionalism. She was not from the wedding planner's office. She was my attorney's senior paralegal. In her hands were a silver smartphone and a thick manila envelope. I took the phone. The screen's wallpaper was a picture of Ethan and me, standing in front of a Christmas tree, his arm around my shoulder, snowflakes catching in my hair. A lifetime ago. I unlocked the phone with a deliberate tap, scrolled to an audio file labeled 03/01/24_02, and pressed play. Then I connected to a portable Bluetooth speaker Mina had placed at center stage, and turned the volume all the way up. Vivian's voice filled the ballroom, sharp with petulance. Ethan, I can't take this anymore. Ethan's voice, irritable. What now? We agreed to wait, wait. I'm pregnant with your baby and you're still telling me to wait, I know. Just be patient. Once the wedding is over, I'll be inside her family's company. I've already started working on her father's 3 biggest clients. Give me a few months and I'll have all those connections transferred to me. The old man trusts me completely. He's already talking about bringing me onto the board, You said that last month. Do you even want to leave her, A short, ugly laugh. Leave Nora. I was never with Nora. I'm with her money. The woman's so simple it's almost sad. One compliment and she's yours forever. Honestly, it's pathetic. If her dad's company didn't have the contacts it does, I'd have dumped her ages ago, A giggle from Vivian, bright and cruel. Hurry up, then. I hate sneaking around. She's so clueless, it's painful to watch. Did I tell you she's been helping me pick out my maid of honor dress? She showed me this hideous thing and I told her it was gorgeous, and she practically wagged her tail, asterisk. Asterisk, just hold on a little longer. After the wedding, I'll buy you that apartment. Any neighborhood you want, asterisk. Promise. Promise. What if she finds out about the baby before then? Asterisk, then we'll say it was an accident. She'll cry for a week and get over it. I know her. She forgives everyone. It's her fatal flaw, asterisk. The recording ended. For a long, paralyzing moment, the ballroom was filled with nothing but the soft hiss of the speakers. Then I looked at my mother. Her hand was pressed over her mouth, the tears finally spilling over. She was not looking at Vivian or Ethan. She was looking at me, and in her eyes I saw not just shock, but a vast, crushing guilt, as if she had been the one who failed to see, failed to protect me. My father's face was carved from granite, the muscle in his jaw pulsing. He had half risen from his chair, his fists shaking, but my mother held him back with a grip that must have hurt. I caught his eye and gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. Ethan's father, Harold Shaw, a man who had said almost nothing all evening, stood up slowly. He was a retired judge, a man who had built his reputation on integrity. He looked at his son, not with anger, but with a profound, bone-deep disappointment that was somehow worse. Then he turned and walked out the side door without a single word. He did not look back. Ethan's mother sagged into her chair, her mouth working soundlessly. The guests were frozen, some with forks halfway to their mouths, others with phones held aloft like talismans. The only movement was the blinking red recording lights. Ethan lunged. You recorded me. You spied on me, you. He reached for the phone, his face twisted with a rage I had never seen before, a rage he had always kept carefully hidden behind his polished smile. Spittle flew from his lips. His hands were reaching for my throat, or the phone, I wasn't sure which. Mina stepped in front of me and blocked him with a single, efficient forearm. She had been a college athlete, and the move was clean and decisive. Ethan stumbled backward, arms windmilling, and crashed into the champagne tower. A cascade of crystal flutes and golden liquid shattered across the stage, the sound like 1,000 tiny bells breaking at once. He stood there, drenched, panting, a man unmasked in every possible way. Only you were allowed to scheme. I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. Only you were allowed to betray. Ethan, you thought you were the only smart person in the world. Vivian let out a scream. It was high and jagged, ripping through the ballroom like a siren. It doesn't matter, she shrieked. I'm carrying his child. His blood. You can't change that with a recording. The baby is innocent. The baby needs a father. She whirled toward the crowd, arms outstretched, her belly thrust forward like a shield. You all understand, don't you? A child shouldn't suffer for the mistakes of adults. Tell her. Tell her she has to let him go. But the same guests who had murmured sympathy moments before now stared back in stony silence. The laughter in that recording, her casual, venomous mockery, had done what no amount of moralizing could. It had stripped away her victimhood and left something ugly exposed. No one was going to be her character witness now. Vivian grabbed Ethan's arm. Ethan, tell them. Tell everyone the baby is yours. Ethan looked down at her hand on his sleeve, and something inside him seemed to curdle. He shook her off violently. Shut up. Just shut your mouth. His voice cracked on the last word, raw with humiliation. She stumbled, colliding with the ring-bearer's pedestal. The velvet box tumbled to the floor and lay there, forgotten, a perfect diamond ring glittering against the spilled champagne. But Vivian straightened. Her face was a wreck of smeared mascara, but her eyes burned with a feral desperation. She lifted her chin, and when she spoke again, her voice was low and vicious. "Fine. You want to deny me now? After everything?" She faced the crowd. "I'll say it, then. We've been together more times than I can count." He knew. He definitely knew. He told me he was only marrying her for the money, and I believed him. Ethan, trapped between her public confession and the evidence already aired, made a choice born of pure survival instinct. He straightened his jacket, a futile gesture, given the champagne soaking through the wool, and he assumed the posture of a man nobly accepting his burdens. "Nora," he said, "this has gone far enough. Yes, I made a mistake. Vivian is carrying my child, and I have to do the right thing. Let's end this cleanly. No more scenes. I'll return part of the money and we can go our separate ways." Part of the money. The sheer, staggering audacity of it almost made me laugh. And I did laugh, a short, bright, incredulous sound that made him blink in confusion. "You still think," I said, "that you're in a position to negotiate?" I took the manila envelope from Mina and opened it. Slowly. Deliberately. The rustle of paper was the only sound in the room. Inside was a document with the logo of one of the country's most respected genetic testing labs. Paternity test report. The cover page was stark white, the black lettering impossibly crisp. Vivian's face, already pale, turned the color of old ash. She took a stumbling step backward, her heels catching on the hem of her gown. "No, that's fake. You faked it. You're trying to destroy me." I didn't answer. I walked toward her, each step measured, unhurried. She kept retreating until her back hit the edge of the dessert table. A tower of macarons wobbled ominously behind her. I stopped inches from her. I opened the report to the final page and held it up, rotating slowly so that every table, every camera, every horrified guest could see the block-lettered conclusion. Ethan Shaw is excluded as the biological father of the fetus. Below it, in smaller print, * biological father identified as an alternate male. Name on file, Harry Shaw, *. Harry Shaw, I read aloud, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. Ethan's cousin. For those of you who don't know the family tree, that's the man standing between this woman and the father she tried to pin this pregnancy on. And no, I turned to face Ethan directly. Before you ask, I didn't sleep with anyone. I just did my homework. Vivian's legs gave out. She crumpled to the floor in a heap of champagne silk, her carefully arranged hair spilling loose, one pearl earring skittering across the stage. The other earring, my birthday gift, remained in her ear, a tiny beacon of the friendship I had poured into her. "No, no, no," she chanted, rocking slightly. "The lab made a mistake. Nora paid them off. It's Ethan's baby, I swear it's Ethan's." The guests had dissolved into chaos. Gasps, shouts, the clatter of overturned glasses. Someone's phone clattered to the floor, still recording. Ethan stood motionless. He stared at the report, then at Vivian huddled on the ground, then back at the report. The muscles in his neck corded. His face cycled through disbelief, fury, humiliation, and finally, a terrifying blankness. His own cousin. The man he had gotten hired at the company, the man he'd loaned money to, the man he'd vouched for at family dinners, had been sleeping with his mistress behind his back. Then he lunged, not at me, but at Vivian. The slap was not a restrained, theatrical gesture. It was a full-force blow, the kind a man throws when he realizes the woman at his feet has just detonated his entire life. The sound of it cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot. Vivian's head snapped to the side, blood bursting from her split lip. "You lying bitch." His voice was shredded, unrecognizable. "You set me up. You and my own cousin. You've been playing me this whole time." He drew back his foot as if to kick her, but the officiant and 2 groomsmen grabbed him, wrestling him back. He fought them, snarling, his perfect tuxedo rumpled beyond saving, his tie askew, a vein throbbing dangerously at his temple. I watched without moving. I felt a strange, hollow calm settle over me. This was the man I had planned to spend my life with, this raging, pathetic creature, stripped of every pretense. And on the floor, the woman I had called my sister, bleeding and whimpering and still, even now, casting about for an escape route. Vivian's hand pressed against her bleeding mouth, and for a moment our eyes met. I saw no remorse in hers. Only a frantic, calculating hatred, scrabbling for a weapon. She found it. "Nora," she spat, her voice cracking. "You think you're so perfect? You think you're innocent? I know things about you. Secrets. If you push me any further, I'll tell everyone everything." A ripple of fascinated horror ran through the crowd. Even Ethan, still heaving in the groomsman's grip, looked up with a flicker of desperate hope. If I had a secret, maybe he wasn't the only villain. Maybe he could drag me down with him. I looked at Vivian's wild, blood-smeared face and felt something almost like pity. She was scraping the bottom of the barrel now, and the barrel was empty. "Are you talking about the ex-boyfriend you dumped, who then pursued me, and whom I rejected 3 times?" I asked quietly. Her face went slack. The calculation in her eyes faltered. She hadn't expected me to know, much less to say it out loud without a trace of shame. I turned to the guests. When we were in college, Vivian threw away a boyfriend. He was devastated. Later, he developed feelings for me, probably because I was the opposite of everything she was. He wrote me letters, waited outside my dorm, the whole cliché. I turned him down. 3 times. I told him that no matter how badly she had treated him, I would never date my friend's ex. I paused. "That's the secret she's been holding over my head for 3 years." A snort of incredulous laughter broke from somewhere in the back. The tension shifted palpably. The scandal she had tried to weaponize was nothing but a sad, empty balloon. "You think everyone is like you," I said, looking down at her. "You think everyone steals and schemes and betrays, because that's all you know how to do. You're not a master manipulator, Vivian. You're just a hollow person with a talent for cruelty." Then I lifted my eyes to the rear doors of the ballroom and gestured. "But since you brought up the topic of secrets, let's ask a few other people to share theirs." The doors swung open. 5 people walked in. Strangers to most of the room, but not to Vivian. When she saw them, the last shred of color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Her hands began to shake so violently that she had to press them against the floor to steady herself. Henry Dalton came first, a quiet man in his late 20s wearing a faded button-down shirt that had clearly seen better days. He held up a bank statement. "I loved her," he said, his voice steady but strained. "We dated for a year. I was working an entry-level job, making barely enough to cover my rent, but I gave her everything I had. She told me her father had terminal cancer. I gave her $12,000, my parents' entire retirement savings. She spent it on a luxury hotel suite with another man and posted the photos online. When I asked for the money back, She called me a pathetic loser and said I should be grateful she ever looked at me. He paused, swallowing hard. I still haven't told my parents the truth. I told them I made a bad investment. My father is 72. He still works because of me. Ian Foster followed, a man with wire-rimmed glasses and the careful posture of someone who has been burned before. He carried a dog-eared notebook, its pages yellowed with age. I was her classmate. She borrowed my entire semester's research notes, over 200 pages that I wrote by hand, late at night, while working 2 jobs to pay for school. She copied my work into her term paper and submitted it before I could submit mine. Then she told the professor I was the plagiarist. I almost lost my scholarship. I almost got expelled. He opened the notebook and held it up. These are the original notes. The timestamps prove when I wrote them. It took me 3 years to clear my name. Claire Bennett stepped forward next, crisp and professional in a navy blazer despite her trembling hands. We were colleagues. I trained her. I stayed late to help her meet deadlines. She repaid me by spreading a rumor that I was sleeping with the CEO to get promoted. HR investigated. By the time I was cleared, my reputation was destroyed. I lost my job, and my fiancé, he believed the rumors. He called off the wedding. She held up a termination letter. This is what she cost me. I'm still rebuilding my career. Tina Morris came forward, a slight woman with shadows under her eyes who looked like she might blow away in a strong wind. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper, but the room was so silent that every word carried. In high school, I introduced her to my first boyfriend. She seduced him the next day and told him I was mentally unstable. Then she told the whole school. I was bullied for 2 years. I stopped talking. I stopped eating. I was diagnosed with severe depression and had to be homeschooled for a year. She held up a medical record, her hand shaking. I'm still in therapy. I may always be in therapy. And she never apologized. Not once. Raina Brooks came last, her eyes glistening but her chin held high. She was my college roommate. My mother died when I was 16. Before she passed, she gave me a gold necklace, a simple chain with a small heart pendant. It wasn't expensive. It was the last thing she ever gave me. Vivian stole it out of my jewelry box while I was in the shower. She wore it to a party and told her friends I was crazy for wanting it back. Her voice cracked. I didn't care about the gold. I just wanted my mom back. 5 voices, 5 testimonies, each one a carefully documented wound. Mina handed me the corresponding evidence, bank transfer receipts, time-stamped emails, medical records with official letterheads, police reports with case numbers, and I held each one up before passing them through the crowd. The guests passed them from hand to hand, their faces shifting from shock to disgust to quiet, simmering fury. Vivian was no longer screaming. She sat slumped on the floor, her lips still oozing, her eyes glazed. The mask was gone. Beneath it was nothing but a cornered animal, hunted by the ghost she'd created. It was then that the ballroom doors opened one last time, and 2 uniformed police officers walked in. They moved with the calm authority of people who have seen everything and are surprised by nothing. Vivian Lockhart, the lead officer, said, his voice carrying easily across the silent room. You are being taken into custody for questioning regarding multiple allegations of fraud and criminal defamation. She did not fight. When they pulled her to her feet and closed the handcuffs around her wrists, she just kept staring at me, her eyes burning with a hatred so pure it felt almost holy. And then she was gone, stumbling between the officers, one bare foot dragging, leaving a faint smear of blood on the polished floor. The silence that followed was vast and cleansing. I turned to Ethan. He was still restrained by the groomsmen, but he had stopped struggling. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite parse, grief, maybe, or the ghost of remorse. Or maybe just the animal panic of a man watching his entire future dissolve in real time. "Nora," he whispered, "I was blind. I was so blind. Please. We can fix this. I'll do anything." "No," I said. "You weren't blind. You just thought you'd never get caught." Arthur Sterling, my attorney, chose that moment to appear at my side. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, and had never lost a case. He opened his briefcase and produced a settlement agreement. "Mr. Shaw," he said, his tone meticulously polite, the kind of polite that was more terrifying than any threat, "this document dissolves the engagement and stipulates the return of all shared property and expenses, plus damages for breach of promise and infidelity. You will sign it now." Ethan stared at the figure printed at the bottom. His mouth twisted. "This is insane. You can't ask for this much." "This," Arthur said, placing a second document on top of the first with the quiet satisfaction of a chess player revealing checkmate, "is a forensic accounting of the $47,000 you embezzled from your employer over the past 12 months. Copies have already been emailed to your company's board and finance department. If you prefer, I can also forward them to the district attorney's office tomorrow morning. White-collar crime sentencing guidelines in this state are quite strict, as I'm sure your father, the retired judge, would confirm, if he were still here." Ethan's face crumbled. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been real fear. Not remorse, fear. The fear of a man who had spent his life skating by on charm and good looks, only to discover that charm doesn't work on handcuffs. "You've been planning this for weeks," he said. "From the moment I heard you call me a boring rich girl who was easy to fool," I said. "Did you really think I was only preparing for a wedding?" He signed. His hand shook so badly the pen tore through the paper. Ink bled across the page like a wound. In a single night, his reputation, his career, his carefully constructed future, all of it turned to ash. His mother, who had watched the entire thing in a state of catatonic shock, finally rose. She walked to her son, took his arm, and led him away. She did not look at me, and I did not expect her to. Some loyalties are too deep to be touched even by the truth. At the door, she paused for just a moment, and I thought she might turn around. But she didn't. She straightened her shoulders and kept walking, dragging her ruined son into the night. When the doors closed behind them, I let out a breath I felt I had been holding for 3 years. The ballroom was a wreckage of overturned chairs, shattered glass, and half-eaten meals. But the sun was still pouring through the tall windows, and somewhere outside, birds were singing. I walked to the center of the stage and picked up the abandoned microphone. It was still slick with Vivian's smeared foundation. "Today was not the wedding I planned," I said, my voice steady. "But it was the one I needed. It showed me exactly who people are, and it gave me the chance to walk away before I lost myself completely. Thank you all for witnessing it. From today, Nora Sinclair starts over." The applause began slowly, then swelled into a roar. I saw my mother crying openly, my father's stoic mask finally cracking as he wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I saw friends and strangers alike rising to their feet, not out of pity, but out of something fiercer, respect. I went to the bridal suite and unzipped my wedding dress. I stepped out of it carefully, folding the veil my mother had sewn with such love. I dressed in a sharp white pantsuit, pulled my hair into a high ponytail, and looked in the mirror. The woman who looked back had clear eyes and steady hands. She was not a victim. She was not a fool. She was free. I deleted Ethan's contact. I deleted Vivian's. Every photo, every chat log, every digital ghost of the life I'd almost been trapped in, erased with a swipe. My finger hovered over the delete button for the shared photo album. 3 years of memories, 3 years of lies, and then I pressed down without hesitation. Then I walked out of the hotel into the clean, bright afternoon. The air smelled like autumn, like wood smoke and chrysanthemums. A breeze lifted the ends of my ponytail. I took the deepest breath I'd taken in years, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like the air actually reached my lungs. I learned later that Ethan lost his job within 24 hours. The embezzlement evidence was incontrovertible, and his company, already under scrutiny from an unrelated audit, moved swiftly to protect themselves. He tried to find work in the same industry, but word travels fast in those circles, and no one wanted to hire a man who had been publicly exposed as a fraud and an adulterer in front of 300 witnesses. He ended up in a neighboring state, working a commission-only sales job for a no-name company, living in a studio apartment the size of a walk-in closet, his expensive suits gathering dust in a storage unit he couldn't afford. He tried to contact me several times, flowers, letters, drunken voicemails in the middle of the night. I blocked every number. Then came a final, desperate appearance outside my office building with a banner that read Nora, I love you in red and gold, the same colors as the wedding he'd destroyed. I watched him through the window for a full minute, this hollowed-out man who had once seemed so charming, so full of promise, and then I called the police. He was escorted off the premises, and a restraining order followed shortly after. I never saw him again. Vivian's case went to trial. The fraud charge, Henry's $12,000, carried the heaviest weight, but the defamation charges from Claire, Ian, and the others stacked up. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s who seemed to take personal satisfaction in the case, presented the evidence I had gathered, the recordings, the screenshots, the financial records. Vivian's defense attorney tried to paint her as a victim of circumstance, a troubled woman who had made mistakes. But the 5 witnesses, Henry, Ian, Claire, Tina, and Raina, sat in the courtroom every single day, a silent row of unbroken survivors. Their presence was more powerful than any testimony. She was convicted and sentenced to 3.5 years. The baby, already fragile from her erratic prenatal care and the stress of the arrest, was lost during her 3rd week in custody. No one visited her. No one mourned with her. The friends she'd collected over the years, the people she'd charmed and manipulated and used, melted away like frost in the sun. As for the 5 who testified, Henry got his money back through a court-ordered restitution, and used part of it to help his parents expand their small grocery store. Ian's academic record was fully cleared, the university issued a formal apology, and he went on to a research fellowship at a prestigious institute. Claire landed a better job at a firm that valued her integrity. And last I heard, she had been promoted to senior management. Tina, after years of therapy and medication, opened a small bed and breakfast in the countryside with a kind and gentle partner who understood her past. Raina's mother's necklace was recovered from Vivian's apartment. It had been hidden in a velvet box among a pile of costume jewelry, as if it meant nothing at all. The police returned it to her, and she sent me a photo of it gleaming against her collarbone. Underneath the photo, she wrote, "Thank you for bringing my mom home. I left my old job. With part of my savings and a loan from my father, a loan I insisted on, with proper terms and interest, I opened a small practice called Nora's Shield, a legal and advocacy office dedicated to women fighting for their rights. We took on cases of domestic abuse, workplace harassment, coercive control, and financial fraud. Arthur Sterling became our consulting attorney, and 𝐃𝐄𝐒 my business partner. In our first year, we won 16 cases and brokered fair settlements in 5 more. Every victory felt like a brick laid in the foundation of the woman I was becoming. The office was small, 3 rooms in a converted brownstone, but it was mine. On the wall, I hung my father's calligraphy: "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." 8 months after the wedding that wasn't, I attended a business mixer I almost skipped. I had been working 14-hour days and wanted nothing more than to go home, order takeout, and watch bad reality TV. But Mina insisted. "You need to network," she said. "Also, you need to leave your apartment. You're starting to talk to your plants." I was standing near the canopy table, feeling out of place and counting the minutes until I could politely escape, when a man beside me muttered, "God, these speakers are awful. I think that one just used synergy as a verb." I turned. He was tall, with a quiet, self-possessed manner and the kind of eyes that listened before they spoke. His suit was well cut but not flashy, the kind of quality that doesn't need to announce itself. "Synergize," I corrected. He used synergize as a verb. "It's worse." He laughed, a genuine, unforced sound. "You're right. That is worse. I'm Lucas Hawthorne. And you look like you're also wondering if it's too early to leave." 20 more minutes, I said. I promised my business partner I'd stay for at least an hour. Then let's make those 20 minutes count. "What do you do?" When I told him about Nora's shield, he didn't offer the usual polite nods and quick exits. He leaned in, genuinely interested, and asked, "What's the biggest barrier your clients face in getting legal aid? Is it cost, access, or just not knowing where to start?" We talked for 4 hours that first afternoon, long past the 20 minutes, long past the end of the mixer, until the hotel staff started stacking chairs around us. Then again over coffee the next week, and then at a tiny jazz club the week after that. He was an investment partner at a firm that specialized in social impact ventures, companies that tried to do good while doing well. He asked thoughtful questions and listened to the answers. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to impress me with his portfolio or his connections. He just paid attention. He learned about my past not through gossip but because I told him, one evening when the conversation drifted late and the wine was low. I didn't plan to tell him. It just came out, the whole ugly story, from the first screenshot to the final handcuff. When I finished, I braced myself for the usual responses: pity, discomfort, the subtle retreat of someone who realizes you come with baggage. Instead, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You handled that with more clarity than most people find in a lifetime. I'm sorry you went through it, but I'm not sorry about who it made you. The woman I'm looking at right now, she's extraordinary." It was not a whirlwind. It was a slow, steady, sunlit unfolding. He remembered every small thing I mentioned: a film I wanted to see, a hiking trail I'd bookmarked, a dish I'd loved in a tiny restaurant years ago. He never crowded me, never rushed me. When I said I wasn't ready for marriage or children, he said, "We move at your pace." Always. I'm not going anywhere. He never tried to fix me. He never treated me like something broken that needed to be repaired. He just showed up, day after day, steady as the tide, until I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. One evening, 6 months into our relationship, he handed me an invitation to a charity gala. On the blank inside cover, he had written in his steady, architectural handwriting, * for the clearest, bravest woman I know. "Will you be my partner for the evening? *. I looked at the invitation, then at him, at this man who had never once made me feel like I needed to be smaller or quieter or less complicated. And I realized, with a quiet jolt, that I had not thought about Ethan in weeks. The scar was still there, a faint silver line on my heart, but it no longer ached. It was simply part of the map of my life, marking the place where I had learned to save myself. Yes, I said. Now, when I look back at that surreal, catastrophic wedding day, I do not feel bitterness. I feel a strange, hard-won gratitude. It was the day I stopped performing my life and started living it. The day I learned that kindness without boundaries is just another form of self-destruction, and that walking away from a fire, even with burns, is still an act of survival worth celebrating. I still love love. I still believe in friendship and loyalty and the possibility of being wholly known by another person. But I no longer make myself smaller to fit into someone else's story. I am the author of my own now. And if anyone tries to take the pen from my hand again, they'll find that I've learned how to hold it with a grip that doesn't break. To every woman who has been told she is too much or not enough, too trusting or too suspicious, too soft or too sharp, hear this: you can be gentle and still have teeth. You can be kind and still see clearly. You can love deeply and still refuse to be destroyed. When you finally shake off the people who only wanted to use you, you will find that the light was always there, waiting for you to turn around and claim it. Walk away from the wreckage. Build something fierce and beautiful from the ashes. And never, ever apologize for saving yourself.